There was once a time when almost the entire Indian subcontinent was ostensibly led by a woman. She was not the daughter of an emperor who didn't have any male heirs. She was not from a royal lineage more important than the one she married into. She was instead just a poor refugee who escaped from Persia to the Mughal Empire, and over time, with the help of her brother and her father, built something of herself. So much so that at one point her father would become the chief minister of the Emperor Jahangir, and she would end up marrying the emperor, and through that she would become one of the most powerful queens in history of India. How did that happen? Well, let's do some history. There are rarely times in history of humanity when someone as powerful and charismatic as Akbar comes along. His ability to alter the social fabric of his empire, which kind of had been heading in one direction for centuries by that point, can only be matched by great emperors like Ashoka or Samudragupta. He had brought in religious harmony and change that was required for nearly 500 years by that point in the subcontinent. So when he died, he left behind a power vacuum that was too much for any one man to fill. It was certainly too much for his heir, Jahangir, who lost his senses to drugs and alcohol. You see, after the death of the Mughal Emperor Akbar, the court was divided into multiple factions. Two of the most major ones were the Islamist fundamentalist faction and the more secular faction that Akbar established. Both had opposing viewpoints, and both together had created a bipolar state that would jump from decision to decision at the tip of a hat. On even days, the orthodox Muslim core of his court would convince the emperor to destroy an old Hindu temple and kill the community protecting it. On odd days, the secular faction would convince him to release the funds to help build the temple back. What? That's something. That was until 6 years into his reign, he married the daughter of the treasurer of Lahore. Her name was Nur Jahan. This was her second marriage and his 11th. And yet she grew to become one of the most powerful people in the court of the emperor. How did that happen? At first, she only had his ear. Because he had instantly fallen in love with her, he would listen to everything she would say. She would suggest to him what to do politically, informally. Impressed by her political acumen, Jahangir eventually made her the Pacha Begum, or the first lady, in just 2 years of her marrying. The Pacha Begum held the ability to hand out farmans or executive orders in the name of the throne, and she would go on to issue more farmans than any queen before her and or since, consolidating more power with each one of them. She made her father as the prime minister of the emperor as one, and her brother as one of the main generals of the empire as another. In time, she would get the emperor's seal and be able to hand out farmans in her own name without Jahangir's approval. Jahangir trusted her so much that he never questioned her in this. She issued coinage in her name and appeared alongside Jahangir in front of the people in Diwan-e-Aam, or the Court of Commons, and addressed people's concern alongside him. And in the Court of Nobles, Diwan-e-Khas, Jahangir had all but stopped making appearance, and she was the one handling it alone. She wasn't just the queen with unprecedented power, she was the throne. She was the emperor. For a time period, it wasn't the Mughal dynasty that ruled the empire, it was her family. And don't mistake her for a woman who was just clever in the court or could manipulate people. She was an incredible general too. Wait, really? At one point, a rebel general, Mahabat Khan, kidnapped the emperor, and it was up to her to lead the forces to free him from captivity. But her first attempt failed, and even she got captured. However, despite that, she escaped and rebuilt an army right under the rebels' nose and used this newly built army to carry out guerrilla warfare tactics to defeat the rebel and free Jahangir. God damn. Another great victory was the campaign to subjugate Mewar. Despite Akbar's greatest efforts, he could not subjugate him in his entire reign until now. This campaign was led by the crowned prince Khurram, or later named Shah Jahan. His attempt at the conquest was failing until Nur Jahan decided to try out diplomacy instead. This led to the kingdom of Mewar finally capitulating, not through force as every Mughal emperor before had tried to do, but through compromise and diplomacy, something that only an outsider like Nur Jahan could accomplish. This impressed Shah Jahan so much that he devoted his forces and influence to her, adding another feather to her cap. So, what were her policies like? So, remember how after the death of Akbar, there was a battle between the secular faction and the Islamist faction? Well, because of Nur Jahan, the secular faction won. She understood that religious harmony was important to the empire's stability. So she sanctioned many religious structures and works across many religions. And with her influence and approval, Jahangir started appearing in Hindu festivals and patronizing them. But where she shined the most was her economic policies. Her policies focused deeply on trade because she understood economics, as she had been from a business family. She built infrastructure that made it easier to trade with the rest of the world and opened up the empire economically and built so much capacity in the textile world that it basically meant that the clothes of almost the entire world came from the Mughal Empire. Her policy started a proto-industrial revolution, creating factories of cloth making and gemstones. And despite this insane economic expansion, she somehow managed to keep inflation low. Militarily, she raised competent generals to do her bidding and ensure stability in the empire. Her goal was not expansion, as outside of Mewar, Mughal Empire did not annex any new lands in this generation. Her aim was to ensure peace and stability within the empire, and with the help of her brother and Shah Jahan, she managed to do it wonderfully. She even built amazing structures like the tomb for her father in Agra, which became the prototype for Taj Mahal. Should we just elect a female Prime Minister? The last time we did that, let's just say the results were complicated. Eventually, she would try to marry her daughter from her previous marriage to Jahangir's youngest son. This was to groom him to be the next emperor, and for that next emperor to be still within her influence. Wait, wouldn't that make them siblings? Step siblings. Shah Jahan caught on to this and he started a 3-year-long rebellion which he eventually won. He deposed of Nur Jahan's son-in-law, ensuring his succession, and exiled Nur Jahan. She was tied to Lahore once more. For the last few years of Jahangir's reign, Shah Jahan was the actual emperor. Highly ironic that the exact same thing would happen to Shah Jahan at the end of his rule. Nur Jahan would spend the last years of her life building a mausoleum for her beloved Jahangir in Lahore before she built one for herself right next to his, so that even in death she would not be departed from her beloved. So that was that. I don't plan on making a video on Shah Jahan's reign because a lot of his plot lines repeat. Only difference is that he was actually kind of competent, at least for the first few years of his reign. Then he kind of sucked, just like his father. But I will discuss the rise of Jahangir's grandson, Aurangzeb, in the next video. And that is going to be an interesting one. See you next time.